Oh my God, this Riyadh card is unreal. What's good? It's Woog. Turki Al-Sheikh has done it again as the rematch between Artur Beterbiev and Dmitry Bivol will be taking place on February 22nd of next year. And of course, there were rumors of there being this new Riyadh card that was getting put together. And the early reports that it was going to be topped off with or co-headlined by the Artur Beterbiev versus Dmitry Bivol rematch. But there was a part of me that was thinking that either because of negotiations getting complicated or Ramadan taking place, that Beterbiev versus Bivol part 2 wouldn't take place until, towards the end of 2025. But here we are with a February 22nd rematch of Beterbiev versus Bivol. And that's only the tip of the iceberg, because this card and the depth of the card is almost like something out of a fantasy in terms of comparing it to what you usually get in a boxing card, even a pay-per-view card. This is not normal for boxing fans. I mean, you've got Joshua Buatsi versus Callum Smith opening the damn thing. And this isn't one of those, well, there's a pretty good opening fight and then the next two fights aren't as cool as the opening fight. No, this isn't that, because the next fight is Zhang versus Agil Kabayel. And the third fight from the bottom is Ortiz Jr. versus Vergil-Madrimov. Like, that might be the fight that I'm most excited about outside of the rematch between Beterbiev versus Bivol. But this is insane. And I'd have to think pretty hard about a better fight card from top to bottom that I have witnessed. And to be clear, that goes for UFC or boxing. This is not normal. So, I don't know what the presence of Turki Al-Sheikh and the Saudis means for boxing in the long run. I don't know what the end result of this is. My hope is that it grows the sport fan base wise. But regardless of what happens, in the future, since his arrival into boxing, in terms of just the product that he's given us, he's already taken over the sport. Yes, we do still get other fight cards from your other promoters, many of whom are also working with Turki Al-Sheikh. Frank Warren in Queensberry, Bob Arum Top Rank is going to be representing Beterbiev, right? So they're a part of this upcoming February card. Eddie Hearn Matchroom is involved in this card as well. But the promoters also have their respective own cards that don't feature crazy stacked lineups like this one. Like, we've got Emmanuel Navarrete versus Oscar Valdez 2, and on that same card you've got Robesi Ramirez versus Espinoza, or Espinoza versus Ramirez, since it was Espinoza that took Ramirez's title. But and that being a headline and co-main, that is very strong by current day boxing fight card standards. That's a pretty good card. And on the Matchroom side, same weekend, you've got Liam Paro versus Richardson Hitchens. That's a pretty good main event fight. And then you've got PBC, who wasn't very active in 2024. They had a few cards, but very few cards throughout 2024. We're hoping that it picks up in 2025. But I mean, when you look at the depth here and the fact that any fight that the boxing public acknowledges needs to happen, aside from, at this point, Canelo versus like David Benavidez, but any fight that we need to get, Turki Al-Sheikh and that team only has been powerful enough to bring us those fights. Beterbiev versus Bivol, perfect example. This, was years in the making, and it looked like it was never going to be made because there wasn't enough money in the current boxing economy to make that fight happen. Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk. I'm not sure, if it's not for Turki Al-Sheikh, whether we would have ever gotten that first battle for undisputed. And they're about to run that back in less than a month. So, from a product standpoint, Turki Al-Sheikh has by and large already taken over boxing. They just bought up Ring Magazine. So I don't know what the end result of this is going to be. Like, will this leave us with a sustainable boxing model? I don't know how long Turkey and the Saudis will want to participate in boxing to the degree that they have, because the way I see it, and no, I'm not doing the accounting. I don't know the books, but what I'm observing is you can either, as a boxing promoter, you can either have a really good product with a really good lineup, or you can make a profit. Is there a sustainable model where you can do both? In the case of Turki Al-Sheikh, I look at these outstanding fight cards as essentially being a marketing expense to draw more tourism and more eyeballs on Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and to make that a global destination. But in a vacuum, business-wise, I don't see these fight cards as in of themselves turning a profit. Like, I don't think that between the pay-per-views and the ticket sales, you are making the money back that you're paying all these fighters and putting these events on. And I don't know if it doesn't appear to be a profitable business model in a vacuum. So what boxing business, what boxing economy will result of these tremendous cards? I don't know what will happen in the wake of this. I mean, let's be real. Golden age of boxing. Can we just say it? Like, look at the last few cards that we had from Riyadh season. Golden age of boxing. So I don't know what business results of this. You know, one person brought up something that was kind of interesting where he said that if Dana White, for instance, could implement the TKO model in boxing, then maybe you do have a sustainable business going forward. And what he meant by that was pretty much having the host city pay for a lot of the expenses because of what it's doing to drive the local economy during that weekend that the event is taking place. So, you know, Riyadh is writing the check. They're basically paying for the event because they are the host country. So they are paying all the fighters and, you know, putting up all the money. And again, I just don't know if they're making that back. But if you are the host country and say you're a promoter and you want to go to, I don't know, pick a city from around the world and you wanted to host your event there, the idea is that they basically pay for it because of what it does for the city. Another example, as I see it, not too dissimilar from the F1 Formula One racing model, where they basically tour throughout the year, you know, country to country to country, and they basically franchise their product out to these different hosting destinations, something like that. But yeah, that's another conversation for another day. Let's talk about this card. And first, I want to just get it out there and address what I see as the elephant in the room. Strong possibility, in my opinion, that at some point this is postponed because Beterbiev gets injured. I'm just going to say it. I knock on wood. I hope it doesn't happen. I hope this goes through smoothly as scheduled on February 22nd. But in most of Beterbiev's fights, between fights, there's either a delay before he schedules a fight or there's a postponement of the fight. You know, his jaw issue before the Callum Smith fight postponed that. I think that he was slow to return to the ring after maybe the Marcus Brown fight before the Adam Dinas fight because of another injury. Beterbiev versus Bivol was postponed because of a knee injury. Artur Beterbiev is frequently fighting sometimes often once a year because there's some sort of an injury that prevents him from returning to the ring sooner. So this is very unusual to get a fight a couple of months ago and then to get Artur Beterbiev back in the ring, you know, within a half a year. I hope it goes through. But I'm just telling you, that's a concern of mine. I wouldn't be surprised if this gets pushed back, which would further complicate matters because you've got Ramadan on the other side of that. So here's to hoping that everything goes smooth. But boy, if it does, this again is just unbelievable. And I just want to give some of my instant early thoughts on each one of these matchups. Let's start with the bottom. Joshua Buatsi versus Callum Smith. You know, Callum Smith has had the unfortunate experience of having fought both Canelo Alvarez and Artur Beterbiev. Callum Smith is a rare case where he's fought both, and no, neither went well for him. But I'm still interested in Callum Smith. If he's still interested in fighting, I'm still interested in watching him. He's got a big punch. He had a good career at 168. He was knocking out other opponents like Lenin Castillo at 175 before losing to Artur Beterbiev. So yeah, on one hand, you've got Callum Smith, who's fought Canelo and Artur Beterbiev. And then you've got Joshua Buatsi, whose two best opponents are Craig Richards and Willie Hutchinson. So you've got an experience gap between these two. And I'm really interested in this matchup. I look at this as being two of the top 6 to 8 guys at light heavyweight. And maybe because of those 2 losses for Callum Smith, some will argue a third if you wanted to give John Ryder a decision over Callum Smith, but 2 official losses, you might see the betting odds favoring Joshua Buatsi because he's coming off of a, beatdown over Willie Hutchinson. But I kind of think Callum Smith might win that one. I don't know if Joshua Buatsi's been hit as hard as he's about to get hit in this fight. And it's not like Callum Smith isn't a pretty good IQ fighter. I mean, he's a pretty good defensive fighter. So Yeah, I'd be curious to see what the opening betting odds are on that one. But yeah, I mean, I love the matchup. I mean, anything short of these two who are topping the bill, Beterbiev and Bivol, and then who else would you throw in there? Anthony Yard. Joe Smith Jr. is not in the division anymore. I mean, these are two of your better light heavyweights, even with that recent loss for Callum Smith. And then second from the bottom, you've got Zhang versus Agil Kabayel. Whoo, like I know a lot of people aren't impressed with how Zhang looked against Joseph Parker, and I do think that Kabayel has the movement and the craft to pretty much execute what Joseph Parker executed against Zhang, maybe even a little bit better because he's a little bit fresher. And, you know, whenever Zhang did make contact with Joseph Parker cleanly, he dropped Joseph Parker like twice in that fight that Joseph Parker won. So there are reasons to think that Kabayel is going to beat Zhang. And, you know, I can't wait to do predictions on each one of these. I might have to, damn. But I mean, although I think that I'd be leaning Kabayel, you know, via decision, Zhang doesn't throw a lot of punches per round, and he tends to gas, and he's in his 40s. Yes, he did just knock Deontay Wilder silly. It's just a way different style of matchup than Kabayel, who's constantly feinting, moving, throwing something, throwing through different angles. And that's not to say Kabayel beats, you know, Prime Wilder, nothing like that. Deontay Wilder, once upon a time, was a bad man. So I just want to acknowledge that. But Zhang is a very dangerous puncher, and you really have to dot your I's and cross your T's if you're going to be hanging around the pocket with that guy. Now, we saw Kabayel do it against Makhmudov, and then we saw him beat down, you know, Frank Sanchez. Frank Sanchez appeared to have a knee injury in that fight, but I don't want to take credit away from Kabayel. He did well against Sanchez, but Kabayel, I feel like he's been one of the biggest beneficiaries from these Riyadh cards because he's been making a name on these cards. Like before the Riyadh cards, most fight fans didn't know about Kabayel, and some might have already forgot that he was a big underdog against Makhmudov, and he stopped Makhmudov in the 4th round. He stopped Frank Sanchez in the 7th round. But yeah, I mean, the fight before the Makhmudov fight, he got hurt pretty badly against Smakichi, and that ended up only lasting 3 rounds. But Kabayel was super wobbly and hurt against Smakichi. That's what made me think that Makhmudov had a good chance at beating Kabayel. But then we got these performances, these recent performances from Kabayel, totally, you know, it built and it just totally elevated his reputation to where now there are probably a lot of people who think that he's going to beat Zhang. But again, I can't count the power out. He's a southpaw. Makhmudov isn't as good as Zhang. I mean, Makhmudov throws more punches than Zhang, but Zhang's got a lot of craft in him. He looks to set up big shots. He's not just trying to walk you down. He's very meticulous, sometimes too meticulous and too low volume. And if it turns into that kind of a fight, then yeah, Kabayel should, you know, win it on the scorecards. But I really don't think that Zhang, coming off of that knockout against Deontay Wilder, wants to fight another fight in the way that he fought Joseph Parker, to where people were scratching their heads like, okay, I guess Zhang might be done. What the hell was that? I think that Zhang wants to right that wrong. And again, Kabayel is a great opportunity to do that, because I think that Kabayel's game plan and strategy is going to be a little bit similar to Joseph Parker. Like, I don't think Kabayel is going to go in there and try to just bulldoze Zhang. If he did, I mean, buckle your seats. That'll be pretty exciting. But I think it's going to involve a lot of movement and a lot of feinting and kind of tiring Zhang out and kind of outfoxing him. So yeah, my gut says Kabayel, but again, I can't wait to do this breakdown. I might end up going with the big southpaw here. And again, Kabayel did get hurt 3 fights ago. I know he looked like he looked against Makhmudov and Sanchez, but he has a good chin. Makhmudov hit him, you know, tagged him a few times, and Kabayel took it pretty well. But Zhang can really put you out of there. And again, I just don't think that, unless that Joseph Parker movement style is just going to be Zhang's kryptonite, you know, forever, I don't think Zhang wants to have a repeat bad performance against a mover like that. So I think I'm leaning Kabayel right now, but we'll take another look. Vergil Ortiz Jr. versus Israil-Madrimov. Again, this might be my favorite non-main event fight of the night. I know we've got DuBois versus Parker too, but this Vergil Ortiz versus Madrimov fight, you know, I saw that Xander Zayas was, you know, he had posted, said, I accepted the fight because there was a rumor for a little bit. Xander Zayas was basically offering to step in for Boots Ennis when Boots pulled out, which, I mean, this whole thing has people relooking at Boots, right? I mean, the fact that he kind of ducked the smoke with Vergil Ortiz Jr. after having that rough fight against Karen Chukazian, it hasn't been a great look in recent weeks for Boots Ennis, which is crazy because a year to 2 years ago, if they were to have made Boots versus Vergil, I think most people would have favored and would have picked Boots. Now, I've always been camp Vergil. Just ever since that fight against Mauricio Herrera, I've just been locked in like, yo, Vergil Ortiz has been one of my favorite prospects and then one of my favorite contenders. I was really mad that they never got Ortiz versus Stanionis together. I've been high on Vergil since that Mauricio Herrera fight. And yeah, there are question marks of Vergil at 154 because he's basically knocked 2 opponents out in the first round, and then he had a blood and guts 50-50 fight against Bohachuk. And I don't know what Vergil Ortiz, I'm still not sure if he's as powerful punch for punch at 154 as he was at 147. I know he hits hella hard, but yo, Bohachuk took a lot of shots against Vergil and he didn't go anywhere, and he gave as good as he got. Dropped Ortiz twice, but I still have a very high opinion of Vergil Ortiz. And again, I think that the narrative between Boots and Ortiz has kind of shifted over the past year to 2 years, especially over the past year. But it was looking like for a moment we were going to get Vergil Ortiz versus Boots. Boots pulls out. Xander Zayas, offers to come in. But I was looking at that matchup and I was thinking, there's no way that Top Rank and Bob Arum and Todd DuBois are going to let their prospect, their Puerto Rican prospect, anywhere near Vergil Ortiz at this stage. And I do think that Xander Zayas is he's kind of the unfortunate, he's a victim of circumstance in the promotion that he's at the division that he's at, because Top Rank doesn't have a deep stable at 154. We see fighters go through that where they might be with a promoter that's strong in certain divisions, but weak in the division that they are in. Like I remember for a while, PBC had Jermall Charlo at 160 at a time when all the other top 160 fighters were elsewhere. So matchmaking becomes difficult there. Derevianchenko, Juan Macias Montiel, right? It was very frustrating. And Xander Zayas, I worry that he's about to step into a similar situation if he stays at 154 for a significant time and if he's with Top Rank during that time. But yeah, for a moment, he threw his name in the hat, at least verbally, and said he would agree to fight Vergil. And then we get the news that it's actually Vergil Ortiz Jr. versus Israil-Madrimov. I thought we were going to get Bohachuk versus Madrimov. And I was like, damn, that's a pretty good, interesting matchup. But boy, Vergil Ortiz Jr. versus Israil-Madrimov, what is Vergil Ortiz doing? Like, Madrimov just fought a very, very close fight with Terrence Crawford, and Madrimov isn't as big a name as some of the other names at 154. And Vergil Ortiz is going to, risk it all against this guy. Vergil Ortiz has really said yes, apparently, to just about anything that he's offered. And again, I look at him as being one of the most, you can't even call him a prospect anymore. He's been contender, pretty much since the knockout over Mean Machine, I would say. He just didn't get a title opportunity at 147, or at least not one that he could stay healthy leading into the fight, because he's been fighting that rhabdomyolysis, which I hope he's out of the woods. Ever since he went to 154, it seems okay. I'm hoping that it stays that way. But yeah, this is very risky business for Vergil Ortiz Jr. especially, but Israil-Madrimov, I thought he was kind of playing with house money after that performance against Terrence Crawford, where he was bound to get another big opportunity, because I think at this point, reputation-wise, and Turkey Al-Sheikh and the Saudis, they took the Ring Magazine website down. That's usually where I click into to look at that's where I used to click into to look at the division by division Ring Top 10. I looked at them as having one of the most, if not the most, credible ranking systems, way more credible than the sanctioning bodies for sure. But I think that reputation-wise, Israil-Madrimov is kind of seen as being a top 3 to top 5 guy in the division right now. I think it depends on whether you consider Terrence Crawford an operative in 154. I think that it might be Canelo or bust for Crawford at this point. I don't expect Crawford to fight the other top 154 guys unless maybe it's Jermell Charlo. If Jermell Charlo could ever rehabilitate his career after this long layoff following the very disappointing performance and lackluster, just what was that performance against Canelo. I was hearing like halfway into this 2024 year that Jermell Charlo was going to continue at 154. Haven't heard anything since. So I don't know what's up with him. But if he was still serious business and serious about fighting and didn't hit this long spell of inactivity, which it's just a little over a year, so it's not too bad. But for a guy that was fighting once to twice a year to then kind of fall into that after that big disappointment of a performance, you just wonder what does he have left for the sport at this point? He's become undisputed at 154. He finally had a mega payday that gets a lot of people to take the sport a little bit less passionately after getting paid like that. So I don't know, but like if he was still prime Jermell Charlo at 154, he would obviously be a top 3 guy in the division. But I feel like so much has happened in the division since he beat Brian Castano, who himself hasn't returned to the ring since that loss in that rematch against Jermell Charlo. So a lot has changed at 154 since, we'll call it the Jermell Charlo era. And then there's Errol Spence, where I don't know what's happening with Errol Spence. Then the other guys are, I mean, it was Tim Tszyu, who to me was looking like a top 2 type of top dog in the division. And I continue to think that way even after he lost to Fundora, given the circumstance and the way that fight played out. I'm not so sure after this stoppage loss against Bakram Murtazaliev. And now you got to look at, well, who's Murtazaliev reputation-wise and where you view him in the division. So, yeah, between Fundora, who's holding like 2 of the belts, the question marks around Errol Spence, Terrence Crawford, Jermell Charlo, and then this new crop that's been emerging, Vergil Ortiz, Israil-Madrimov, Sergey Bohachuk, Jesus Ramos. You still have Erickson Lubin, Charles Conwell. 154 has changed dramatically. It might be the best non-heavyweight division in the sport right now. But I'm just wondering how this Vergil Ortiz, how they match up against each other. I'm almost looking at Madrimov's style as maybe being a big problem for Vergil Ortiz Jr. I mean, you would think that the guy who Vergil would do well against would be either somebody who's coming right at him, like a Mean Machine Kabayel, somebody who's going to look to take you out without being a great defensive fighter. Obviously, if you're an aggressive offensive fighter with great defense, then that's a problem for anybody. But somebody who's going to make it easy for you to find them, I think that Vergil Ortiz does well against. But then you look at, again, the Bohachuk fight, and it's not, Bohachuk wasn't retreating. He was coming at Vergil Ortiz every bit as much, basically, as Vergil was coming at him, especially early. But here we've got Israil-Madrimov, who does so much feinting, foot feinting, and his style was very, very different. I mean, like, you see the way that he fought Kurbanov when he won his belt. Then you see the way that he fought Terrence Crawford. Sort of different styles. He threw a lot more punches against Kurbanov, but I mean, you're fighting Terrence Crawford. You've got to be careful. But I'm just wondering how that Israil-Madrimov approach, if he fights Vergil in the same way that he fought Crawford, how Vergil Ortiz is going to respond to that. Because, you know, Madrimov, for instance, hits a lot harder than Michael McKinson, who's a back foot crafty style fighter who's not easy to find in the ring. So, I don't know how this is going to play out. I mean, instinctively, I was about to go Vergil, but I mean, my gut might be telling me that this is the fight that Vergil takes his first L. If Madrimov is what we think he might be and has learned from whatever mistakes whatever he feels he could have done better at against Crawford, whatever adjustments he thinks that he needs to make, whether it's throwing more punches or trusting his foot feints and allowing that to let his hands go more. I just wonder how Vergil's going to deal with those foot feints. Vergil's got a great hard jab and he's crushing to the body, but Terrence Crawford knew that he had to be careful when jumping in against Madrimov. Is Vergil Ortiz going to throw caution to the wind when he starts relentlessly attacking the body with those nasty hooks? And is he going to come at Madrimov like that? Madrimov could hurt the guy. Madrimov hits hard. I think that initially I might be leaning Madrimov here. And again, I'm a Vergil Ortiz guy, but this might be a troubling matchup. And then there's Carlos Adames versus Hamzah Sheeraz. Like, this has been one of the more frustrating divisions. 160, you've had Carlos Adames, who's been the de facto, WBC champ since Jermall Charlo stopped defending his title. Basically, since Jermall Charlo fought Macias Montiel. Pretty much ever since that, which I think was 2021, you started having Adames winning the meaningful fights, for at least on the PBC side in that division, beating Derevianchenko, stopping Juan Macias Montiel, who gave Jermall Charlo some problems. Adames stopped him and then beat Julian J. Rock Williams. So Adames has been holding it down on the PBC side in that division for a while, but it didn't look like he was going to be fighting any of the other champions in the division, basically Janibek or now Hamzah Sheeraz. I didn't think it was going to happen, but Turkey Al-Sheikh. Carlos Adames, does that mean that, I see PBC on the flyer? So PBC is a part of this promotion. This is going to be the first instance, I believe, of PBC working with Turkey Al-Sheikh and company. I mean, you look at the bottom of this thing, you've got all the big promoters, Top Rank, Boxer, Golden Boy, PBC, this obviously Matchroom, and this is crazy. So yeah, Carlos Adames has been pretty good for a while, but Hamzah Sheeraz looks like he might be special. Now, unless this is an instance of Hamzah Sheeraz having an outstanding offensive arsenal and having an unreal build, being that tall for the divisions. He was at 154 not too long ago at like 6'3". Either he has this great offensive arsenal and then no chin, it turns out. Like, we might discover one day that that's the kryptonite, that he doesn't have a chin. Okay, so like an Amir Khan thing, even though, I mean, in retrospect, Amir Khan did beat Marcos Maidana and some other very hard hitters. So let's put respect on Amir. I feel like sometimes it's overblown. Yes, he did have a suspect chin if you just blasted the hell out of him, like Breidis Prescott or Danny Garcia or, Canelo Alvarez. So he didn't have the strongest of chins, but it's not like he was just totally non-durable. He got hurt late against Maidana and still won it on the cards. And he dropped Maidana, I think, multiple times early in that fight. But we're not talking about Amir Khan in this one. Hamzah Sheeraz has this incredible arsenal, and the rest of his division better hope that he's got a weak chin, because if he doesn't, he's going to be a problem for everybody. They were talking about Janibek versus Hamzah Sheeraz having a purse bid, and they were supposed to have a unification fight. That looked like it fell through. I think that it was reported that Sheeraz pulled out. If he did, we now know why. So instead of Hamzah Sheeraz versus Janibek, we've got Hamzah Sheeraz versus Adames. I think I would favor Hamzah Sheeraz. It just seems like it's a dangerous time to be fighting this guy. He's putting people out just using his lead hand sometimes, not even using his backhand. And in his recent fights, he's been stopping, like he stopped Liam Williams in the first round. Like, he was exciting to watch, and it was kind of like a mysterious thing. Like, damn, how good is this guy? Like, let's see what happens when he fights somebody that we know, right? Liam Williams, again, he stopped him in the first round. I think that him having a bad chin is pretty much the opponent's only hope. Again, we just saw him just dust off Liam Williams. We saw him just stop Ammo Williams, and we saw him just obliterate Tyler Denny, who had just beaten Felix Cash, who I was thinking, might be a major factor in the division in the near future. And again, Tyler Denny beat him, and Tyler Denny just got stopped early against Hamzah Sheeraz. So I would have to favor Hamzah Sheeraz here. Again, Adames is pretty good and has fought some and beaten some pretty good guys, but again, Hamzah Sheeraz might be special. And then we've got Shakur Stevenson versus Floyd Schofield. What the hell is Floyd Schofield thinking? Like, the same way I was thinking about Xander Zayas if he was to fight Vergil Ortiz Jr. Like, bruh, what are you doing? Is the promoter going to let this happen? Why is Oscar letting Floyd Schofield fight Shakur Stevenson? Like, Floyd Schofield's in his early 20s. Maybe it was just the payment. Like, maybe it was just what he's been making to this point and what he was being offered for this fight, that it was just too much money to pass up. And we know Shakur Stevenson's been having a hell of a time getting a super relevant name in the ring with him. We just saw Joe Cordina pull out of the fight. William Zepeda is injured and can't fight Shakur Stevenson. So it's been a very frustrating last year to 2 years in terms of finding the right opponents for Shakur Stevenson. But I mean, Floyd Schofield, you want to talk about stepping up. Like, this is an insane jump in class. And this would be one of those I shook up the world moments in boxing if Floyd Schofield could beat Shakur Stevenson, or even really if he fights super competitively, round over round, to where it's like, okay, gave these couple rounds to him, these couple rounds. If it turns out to be that kind of a fight, then that would be a rocket ship in terms of the ascension of your name and reputation. Because right now, Shakur Stevenson has been viewed as a top 10-ish pound for pound fighter in the sport for like a few years. I think pretty much ever since he beat Oscar Valdez, that's kind of been what a lot of people think of Shakur Stevenson. So for Floyd Schofield I don't think it's going to go well for Floyd Schofield. He's good, but he's green. And he got hit, I think he got dropped in his last fight. Like, my favorite prospect in and around those weights right now is Abdullah Mason. Floyd Schofield's pretty much up there too. But again, this jump in class is just, I don't see it going well. I'm surprised that they made this fight, quite frankly, but I'm here for it. And then we've got Daniel DuBois versus Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker's been on quite the career resurgence. It was looking, Ever since he lost to Dillian Whyte after losing that decision to Anthony Joshua, that was Parker's first loss after becoming champ in a vacant title win over Andy Ruiz. Parker for a while was the only guy to have beaten Andy Ruiz before the Ruiz versus AJ fights. But ever since that close loss to Dillian Whyte, I always looked at that one as being the one that kind of got away, that Joseph Parker should have won. Now, I thought that Dillian Whyte deserved the win. Joseph Parker got dropped multiple times, even though one time was like getting hit by the elbow or forearm or something like that. But in terms of looking at how your career resume is stacking up, you want that W against Dillian Whyte. And then when Joseph Parker, a few fights later, because he fought a few lesser opponents, Junior 5 might have been like the best of that bunch, or rather maybe Derek Chisora, those back-to-back fights. But after that series of wins to rehabilitate Joseph Parker, he got stopped for the first time in his career against Joe Joyce. I thought that was the beginning of the end of Joseph Parker's career. But then after that, he picks up another, win or 2 or 3 against much lesser opponents. And then he has back-to-back fights against Deontay Wilder and Zhilei Zhang, 2 of the most dangerous punchers in the heavyweight division, and he beats them both via decision. This last couple of fights, this couldn't have gone any better for Joseph Parker after getting stopped by Joe Joyce. And now we see him get his next title opportunity, finally gets a new title opportunity. First time since losing his belt to AJ. He's going to be fighting Daniel Dubois, who is fresh off of obliterating Anthony Joshua in one of the most jaw-dropping performances in all of 2024. That was one of those like, oh my God, somebody help him. We were wondering what it was going to be like when these two, sluggers, collide. Like, was Daniel Dubois ready for the moment? Most of us, including myself, thought that ultimately he's got a puncher's chance, but that's about it because of AJ's class and how AJ looked against, not even the one of the knockout of the year contenders against Francis Ngannou. That is its own thing, because we experienced this Francis Ngannou in boxing thing where he fought Tyson Fury and then Anthony Joshua. Very different results in those 2 fights. So I'm still not sure what to make of all of that. It's more just scratching my head on why couldn't Tyson Fury do more. But even aside from that knockout for Anthony Joshua over Ngannou, I'm more so talking about his performance against like Otto Wallin, where it was dominant and it led to a pretty early stoppage. That was the Anthony Joshua coming into this Daniel Dubois fight, like a resurgent and confident Anthony Joshua. And from the damn near opening bell onward, Anthony Joshua was getting hit, he was getting backed up, he was getting hurt. Yes, he did have that one moment right before getting finished where he, hit Dubois and appeared to hurt him. But Daniel Dubois, like, it's almost like somebody who has superpowers and never really understood it or never really believed that he was capable of, of displaying and showcasing those powers. It's like Daniel Dubois like woke up one morning and discovered like, hey, I might be the baddest man on the planet, just like out of nowhere. Like Daniel Dubois always struck me as somebody who was like super physically gifted, but might be the type to get punked by a little dude on a high school campus. You know what I mean? Like that was kind of what I was reading from Daniel Dubois, somebody who like, if they have the type of therapy to like remove like a small part of the brain that's like a type of like insecurity or some sort of self-awareness to where you become like more self-conscious or apprehensive or unsure. Like if there was some way that you could operate on Daniel Dubois to where he was just able to his full capacity demonstrate his physical abilities, that guy might be the baddest man on the planet. But I didn't think that that's what we got. And then we saw the turnarounds against Jarrell Big Baby Miller, especially against Filip Ergovic, where he ran through so many right hands and just seemed super determined that no, I'm going to break you down. I'm going to keep on walking through whatever you give me. And there is nothing in this world that's going to stop me from getting to you. That was how Daniel Dubois fought Filip Ergovic. It was like, damn, Daniel, like it was pretty crazy. So when you coupled that one with the win over Jarrell Miller, who a lot of people thought might end up bullying Daniel Dubois in the ring, Jarrell Miller got stopped in the 10th and final round. So these were 2 very redemptive performances for Daniel Dubois and his reputation. Then he fights Anthony Joshua, puts on that performance, knocks Anthony Joshua out, and now we're getting this fight between Daniel Dubois and Joseph Parker, both guys on this great like resurgence, very different places in their career. Dubois much younger than Joseph Parker, but this is an excellent fight. And I do think that if we're dealing with the same Daniel Dubois that we have been, especially in these last 2 fights, that it's going to be a rough night for Joseph Parker. I do think so. All props to Joseph Parker. And he seems like a very good dude. Like I pull for him to do well. Like I wanted him to be able to recapture a title at some point in his career. I just don't think it's going to be on this night against Daniel Dubois. Again, if we're dealing with the same Dubois. But again, Joseph Parker has kind of stymied the activity of some of the most dangerous punchers, Deontay Wilder and Zhilei Zhang, in his last 2 fights. But Daniel Dubois isn't low volume like Deontay Wilder and Zhilei Zhang. And I don't see Daniel Dubois getting deterred to where he stops throwing punches and starts eating jabs and starts letting Joseph Parker move around and jump in on him, let his hands go and jump out without paying the price. I don't see it. So my early thoughts are leaning Daniel Dubois. And then we've got Artur Beterbiev versus Dmitry Bivol. And look, I'm in the camp. I thought just when I was watching the fight live, I thought Bivol won. I was in the moment. I was nearly heartbroken for Dmitry Bivol when they read that decision, because I thought Dmitry Bivol did about as good as he could humanly do against the destructive wrecking ball that is Artur Beterbiev. Dmitry Bivol, I thought, he made that a Dmitry Bivol fight in terms of the pacing, the way that the fight went down round over round. Beterbiev eating combinations sometimes and not able to hit Bivol back with anything significant in a lot of those exchanges. I thought Bivol won a lot of rounds in that fight, but there were several close rounds. Beterbiev ended up getting the decision, and they're about to run it back. Again, I hope Beterbiev doesn't get injured, but this is a pretty quick turnaround. I don't know if Bivol could do any better in the rematch than he did in the first fight. I feel like Beterbiev definitely can. I don't know if Bivol can. And so, like, unless we get the exact same fight and the decision goes the other way, then I think Beterbiev wins this one more observably and more demonstratively than he did in the first fight. Again, I thought Bivol won, but I don't even know if Bivol can fight that exact same fight again. Yes, it's Beterbiev, who's pushing 40 years old and will be 40 years old by the time this rematch takes place. There is that. But I don't know what that first fight took out of Dmitry Bivol. But it's still 33 years old. But that's like, that's 33 in, biological years, but in fight years. I mean, the guys fought Jean Pascal, Joe Smith Jr., Canelo Alvarez, even though he didn't get hit a ton against Canelo, Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez, Sullivan Barrera, Ike Chilemba, and now Artur Beterbiev. And Bivol handled those fights about as well as anybody could handle those fights. Fight over fight over fight. He's had a brilliant career, but even with his excellent defense and his accurate high volume combination punching offense, like, this has to take a toll on you over time, I'd imagine. So yeah, I wonder if Bivol could box as well and be able to go 12 with Beterbiev, assuming Beterbiev is still Beterbiev. Can Bivol handle that wrecking ball twice like that? If he could fight a better fight in the rematch, I would be pretty damn impressed. And I wonder if he does that, if the reason for that would be because Beterbiev is showing his age, and that would obviously be a part of the narrative. Like, whenever Beterbiev falls off, it's going to be, oh yeah, he got too old eventually. That's just an inevitable part of this. But I really just wonder if that first performance that Bivol gave us against Beterbiev was the absolute best he could do. I don't know, but right now I think I'm leaning Beterbiev, not by stoppage, but would he drop Bivol? I don't know. I can't wait to break this one down though. But I think gut-wise, I'm going Beterbiev, even if I feel like I saw Bivol win that first fight. Yeah, I think I'm leaning Beterbiev in this one. Even though, I mean, obviously, if Bivol wins the rematch, they could run a third fight. But I mean, yeah, I can't wait to break this one down. But man, let me know your thoughts on this fight card. Again, you'd have to go back to like the Don King era to even come close to cards like the ones that Turki Al-Sheikh and the Saudis are putting on here. This is crazy. Riyadh season really has, to a degree, already taken over boxing. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this one in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.